And while we could look at the wife's anger at the husband's, which it's like, duh, they're going to be a little frustrated. How often is it that the husband is angry with the wife?
That happens a lot.
Welcome to Coffee with the Couple Cure, where we share practical tips for your relationship before you finish your first cup. Here's Jay and Lori Pyatt.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another podcast episode of Coffee with the Couple Cure and another video on the Couple Cure YouTube channel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori.
I'm Jay.
Today we're going to talk about anger, basically anger toward God on the part of the partner. Where this is coming from, I write for a network, and I'd written an article for that network, and the phrase that I used for a certain part was, I was angry at God. And what I meant was, I was angry at him for allowing all the betrayals, the lies, allowing me to be in the dark for so long. And the word processing software didn't like the word at. And so I tried, angry with. I was angry with God for allowing all these things. And so, time went on. But then my mind went back to the angry at God, angry with God, angry at God, angry with God. And I feel like what God said in that moment to me was, yeah, you were angry at me, but what you didn't understand was I was angry right along with you. You were angry right along with me. And so I wrote on that, and I'll just read you a part of it. I remembered back to the times I screamed at him, but I also remembered something interesting. I remembered that in those moments of screaming at him, I never felt like he was upset with me. In those moments, I felt something else. I felt it changed from my being angry at God to my being angry with God, being angry right alongside him over what had happened, being angry over my husband's actions together. It was as if he'd been angry first. He mourned with me. He tore his garments with me. He held me after I screamed at him, and we cried because God was angry at being replaced too. And then I go on, asking the ladies if they'd ever experienced anything like this. And then something funny happened. When I posted it to that network, it auto-corrected on that platform as well to angry as God. And somebody else caught it. Like I had published it, and somebody's like, oh, I don't know if you meant to do this or not, or if it autocorrected again, but it has angry as God. And I feel like that was, not I'm angry as a God, but I feel like that was God saying, no, your level of anger toward this is how angry I am about it too. And if you read how God feels about people who pour out their lust with prostitutes or pour out their lust with other women, you'll understand he is mad about it. Not that he doesn't love those guys, but there's a part of him that's really angry about this. So I thought I would cover that today and just kind of duke it out with my husband over it or discuss it with my husband and kind of pick his brain on it.
Yeah, both of you have good reason to be angry with me. I did replace God. In fact, I even treated him as a presumptuous child would, to go to his father and just say, I know I screwed up, but you just got to take it, basically. Because even though I was confessing to God, I wasn't really, I wasn't confessing to Lori at that time, and I wasn't really taking all of that interaction seriously with God. So I can understand why both of them would be angry with me. And I feel like that anger is very righteous. I didn't just stand before people and agree to hold this marriage pure and be one and only interaction with Lori, but I stood before God and I didn't keep that promise either.
Okay. Where are guys angry? And the reason I bring this up is because we see the men's anger in probably 99% of the couples that come our way.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the guys are angry with God because they're, they go to God and they say, God, take this away from me. And God doesn't. And I think they're angry because they want it to be easy. They want it to somehow be slapped out of their hand and not from a heart of surrender and really recognizing something. But I think they get angry with God because he's not somehow stopping them from being free to do whatever they want, which is what God has said he values in us. He values us to be free. I think they're angry with that. I think they're angry that there's, and I don't know if they can be angry with God about this or not, but just that it's so prevalent, it's so easy to get to. It's not talked about in the church. It's, there's so much shame that goes along with it that I think they're angry somehow, feeling like God is going to ultimately reject them for their sins, and they don't see that they're actively rejecting God. So I think it's a twisted anger.
How many of them are angry at themselves, or how often do you see that? Like, I wish I could control this.
Yeah, I think that's kind of very deep rooted anger for most of these guys, is knowing they can't control it. They're so angry with themselves, like, I have all this self-control in all these other areas of my life. Why does this one continue to just be so hard to deal with? And, a lot of anger over choices that they made and the consequences of those choices. That, I think sometimes they're just angry that the consequences are actually coming through. But they're definitely angry with themselves, angry that they made the choices they did.
And while we could look at the wives' anger at the husbands, which it's like, duh, they're going to be a little frustrated, depending on how many betrayal cycles and cycles of lying and that sort of thing. How often is it that the husband is angry with the wife?
That happens a lot.
Really?
Well, let me put it a different way. The anger comes out not necessarily at the wife. Some of it is like I said about, between us, when you would bring it up, for whatever reason, the only way I could see it was, you're only bringing this up to make me feel bad. And therefore, you're trying to somehow hurt me. So I can be angry or upset about that. And that's not true. What you were bringing it to me for was, hey, this hurt and I need to talk about it.
Right.
But the timeline of trauma is non-existent. For most of these guys, it's like, but that was years ago and I've apologized for it. Why would you bring it up right now, unless your only motive to bring this up is to hurt me? So therefore I can get angry about it. That's one way in which the guys get angry. I think the other way in which they get angry is the women see more clearly. So when the guy says, well, I did this or that, and the woman says, wait a minute, that's not what you told me about this other thing, or I noticed that you did this or that, and the guys are like, that can't possibly be true. And instead of looking at themselves and saying, that's disruptive to me, they lash out at the person pointing it out. They're shooting the messenger.
Mm.
And I think that tends to happen a lot more frequently than the guys would like to admit.
Okay. One thing to keep in mind is something our marriage therapist said, and that is all upset is due to unmet expectations. Obviously, the women, if they're upset over other women being brought into the marriage, their expectation is, I thought you said at the wedding altar that you would forsake all others. I've been doing that because I thought that was our thing. I thought we were going to do that for each other. So that's her obvious expectation that wasn't met. But guys, if you're being upset with her, then you really need to figure out, what is my upset? What was
Right.
my expectation?
Right.
Was it that she would get over it quickly? Was it that I would be able to lie to her and then she'd just trust me anyway in the future?
I think that the anger may be what I've heard described as anger is shame's bodyguard. That anger is I don't want to feel vulnerable. I don't want to open myself to more scrutiny, so I'm just going to get angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is probably 80%. It may not be, I wish she was over this right now, but it's like, why do we keep pointing the spotlight at me?
Mm-hmm.
And it's that same thing. I don't want my shame out in the open, and so I'm going to get angry. And getting angry gets the spotlight off of me.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of used as a smoke and mirrors or deflection.
Yeah.
Along with the shame, something else I've seen in some guys is it just makes them look bad. She's bringing it up. He doesn't want to look bad. He doesn't want to look like the bad guy. And he might bring, stuff that she's done up at that point. So that can be part of his anger, is just that pride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That pride that we see somewhat often in our work.
Right. So guys, if you are having issues with anger, my first recommendation would be to look internally. You're probably angry because this means something about you. You're going to have to take some ownership. And either out of pride, like defending yourself, all guys do this, my pastor does this, whatever excuse you want to give yourself, or that you don't want to be pushed out into the light and talk about all the shameful things you've done, and therefore you're using anger to shut down the conversation. There's a place for you to look at why anger has become your go-to emotion.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's probably because it's been very effective.
Sure.
It's probably been used maybe by the people who raised you or maybe your siblings, but you've seen that it's very, very effective in controlling the conversation, controlling what's being said, or basically keeping somebody quiet.
Yeah. And the anger that God and your wife have are legitimate.
Well, this one's gone on long, and so we're going to wrap it up now.
Yeah, if you're having anger issues, reach out to somebody. It is potentially just covering other things that you're really not wanting to deal with. So there's hope, that you're not just an angry person, that there is something there driving this.
Yeah, and there are some there are simple solutions for it that actually get you really, really far in rebuilding trust.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you again on the next episode.
Bye, guys.
Bye.